college football for ESPN. Adam Rittenberg joins us on 365 Sports with Paul, Craig, and David. And here we go on this Wednesday afternoon. Adam, thank you very much for your time. I know Saturday you were here in Waco for Oklahoma State and Baylor. I was saying this during the break. It seems to me, and of course winning doesn't hurt, but do you kind of get the impression that Mike Gundy is about as calm and collective and in a good place right now as you've seen him in a while?
I think he is. I was with him the previous Monday, and I think he's got a team that he knows isn't perfect, but has a lot of experience in key areas. Most notably, as quarterback, he used the word mastered to describe how Spencer Sanders is with the offense, and brought up that he's kind of at that level that Mason Rudolph was at the end of his career, and Brandon Weeden was at the end of his career, and he's obviously got some talent at receiver as the Baylor fans were able to see during that game. They're also very good on the defensive line. But in the same breath, what I like about the thing about Mike is he's at this point in his career, and it's refreshing when a coach is completely comfortable with who he is and isn't going to be somebody that he's not or try to pretend to be something else. So I think he's also understanding that the Big 12 is really competitive and there really aren't any terrible teams. And he told me he fully believes there's going to be at least 1-2 loss team in the Big 12 championship game, because this league is going to beat each other up a lot, because there's a lot of really, really good teams, but maybe no elite team, although Oklahoma State is trying to be that.
Do you think they are built enough to do that, given that they've had some losses? Their team that was maybe elite as far as talent goes was last year, and this one has a little less experience.
It does, and in talking to the defensive coordinator, Derek Mason, I think he's still quite concerned about where they are in the secondary. They don't have a lot of guys they can really rely on at this point, but they're so deep up front. I mean, he told me they can play 12 linemen, and a number of those linemen are going to be in the NFL in a few years. So if they can lean on their front to a point where they can develop a little bit more experience and reliability in the back end to go against some of the good quarterbacks that they're going to face the rest of the way, I think they'll feel pretty good, because their own guy is going to give them chances. I mean, I think Sanders is very comfortable in big games, and they're not great at running back, but they're good enough, and they look to be pretty strong at receiver. That group has really jumped out to me so far this year.
Adam, what were your impressions of Baylor? Obviously tough to lose at home. Already their second loss now at this point, but the first in Big 12 play. I know Dave Aranda lamented some of the mistakes in the postgame, and they kind of seem to have an idea of where they erred. But what were your thoughts on seeing the Bears up close?
It was just a young team. I think it's a team that is missing some of the key guys that they had last year. And I can't tell you how many coaches have glowed about Jalen Petrie. I mean, I've had a number of veteran coaches tell me he was the best college player they ever saw. And, these are guys that have been around for decades in some cases. And so that, you're not just going to replace that easily. And obviously Terrell Bernard was another outstanding player for Baylor. I think teams look at their defense and they worry certainly about 62 in the middle of the line, but there's not that many other guys that really scare them from a preparation standpoint. So they found ways. I think teams are going to find ways to attack this defense until it kind of matures a little bit. And that's what really puts more impetus on Baylor to start faster than it did against Oklahoma State. I thought they moved the ball decently in that first half, but just came out with 3 points, and you're down, 19-3. That's a hard position to be in against anyone, especially a team that's as talented as Oak State. So they're going to have to find ways to start faster. They've got good coaches on this team. I think they've a good offensive line. I really like the young running back who kind of carried the load for them and did some good things. But again, this is not the Baylor defense that we saw last season. It just isn't.
Adam, the coaching changes already off and running. With Scott Frost was the first one among others, and now Paul Chryst, despite what is really almost a spectacular record, but they're losing ground. Is this because there's so much money you can just fire coaches and not worry so much about the buyouts?
Well, absolutely, it's part of it. Is that money doesn't seem to be an obstacle at all for these teams. I mean, Nebraska fired Scott Frost. They could have waited 3 weeks and saved $7.5 million. So whenever these ADs talk about, well, I don't know if we can do anything financially, they're not telling the truth unless they're in a league where they're not getting a whole lot of media dollars. So it just shows the nature of the sport. And as the money kept going up and up and up and up, this is something that you could probably see coming. The fact that we're sitting here on October 5th with 5 Power 5 openings, I don't think that was something I expected, but this certainly could become the norm, especially when you have coaches that essentially go into the season, almost like it would be surprising if they kept their job. I mean, Scott Frost, it was like if he had kept his job for 23, it would be a surprise. Jeff Collins, everyone thought he'd be fired with that schedule, and it's like he didn't even have a chance. Same with Herm Edwards. No one thought Herm Edwards was going to be back, and so I guess the hesitancy to make the changes maybe on the year before is the only surprise here. But the fact that those guys are no longer in their jobs is really not a surprise.
Adam, who do you expect to be next? If we're having this conversation on October 12th or 19th, who do you expect to be the next couple of guys?
Right. So there were 4 coaches entering the season that were on the hottest of seats. 3 of them have already been fired in Scott Frost, Jeff Collins, and Herm Edwards. The 4th was Brian Harsin. And, a lot of us were certainly paying attention on Sunday before the Paul Chryst news broke, whether there'd be any news out of Auburn after they blew that 17-0 lead and were outscored 21-0 the rest of the way by LSU. They obviously did not do anything yet, but I think there's an expectation if they were to lose this weekend to Georgia, especially if it's ugly, going into a bye week, that Auburn would probably make a change. And now they have an interim athletic director who I'm told has a really good chance at a permanent job, and so I don't think they would hesitate to make a change in that case. So I think Brian Harsin's in that category. I think Scott Satterfield at Louisville is in that category. They've had a really poor start to the season. They've lost to both Syracuse and Boston College on the road. Boston College hasn't been playing well at all, and Louisville lost to them. I think if they were to lose to Virginia, who's maybe struggling even more so than BC this weekend, there's a pretty good chance that there'll be a change there.
Adam, on Auburn, it's an SEC job, so there'll be plenty of people lined up. But will it be one of those jobs that they might not be able to get their first choice because the behind the scenes is a little wackadoodle there?
Well, I think any coach and his representation would have to investigate like what Auburn is. And I think it's impossible for any coach to unite the power people at Auburn. I think the best that you can hope for is that most of them are in your corner. But again, it is an SEC job. It's a job where you can recruit. You have access to Atlanta, only an hour and a half away. And say what you want about Auburn. They've won a national championship and they played for another in the last 12, 13 years. And they've also had some success against Alabama. Gus Malzahn beat Nick Saban a couple of times. And so I think, whether it's a guy like Lane Kiffin or Hugh Freeze or maybe Deion Sanders, I think your coaches are going to be interested in at least discussing that. But if they, the big word in college athletics, as you guys know, from a coaching perspective, is alignment. I think Baylor's got really good alignment right now. Mike Gundy has really good alignment at Oklahoma State after maybe not having that with some previous administrators. I don't think anyone can look at the Auburn situation and say, oh, there's great alignment here. I'm going to get everything that I want and we're all going to be on the same page. You have to understand that coming in the door, and that might turn off some of these coaching candidates. But I think there's enough really good coaches that still would be interested in the Auburn job.
Adam, how often are you hearing Lance Leipold's name brought up just in terms of these coaching jobs? And I know there's some that make more sense than others, but it just seems like something Kansas is not going to be able to avoid no matter how hard they try is him being involved in rumors.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of factors here. I mean, Lance is an older coach. If Lance were 42 and he was just kind of starting out with his first Power 5 job, he might be less inclined to make a move. But the fact is, there's 2 jobs. I mean, if you just came up with the 2 jobs that Lance was maybe best suited for after Kansas, it might be Wisconsin and Nebraska. I mean, the guy's from Wisconsin. He won a bunch of national championships in Division III in the state. He worked at the University of Wisconsin. I mean, that is a dream job for a guy like Lance Leipold. And then he spent, I think it was 13 years in the state of Nebraska, including several on the Nebraska coaching staff. He's also at Nebraska Omaha. So those 2 jobs are probably at the top of his list. And Lance is a realist. He knows he's older. He knows he's probably only got one major move left after the great work he's done at Kansas. I'm just glad that we're talking about the guy. This is someone who, I cover the coaching industry pretty closely. I was excited about Lance Leipold years ago because you just saw what he did at Wisconsin Whitewater, and if he ever got a chance in the FBS, it would just be fascinating. And he's gotten that chance, and he's made the most of it, and now he's in the position to jump to a really major job.
I don't know who wrote the article, Adam, but it was out maybe yesterday about Lance Leipold and where he was, and obviously Chris Kleiman, what he did at North Dakota State, among others who have won at the non-FBS level or even FCS level, and how when they've been given the chance, they've done well. I know people want to make a big splash or whatever, but you think their success, Leipold and also Kleiman, among others, might get ADs to look a little deeper at the lower division levels of college football?
I hope so, because I've talked to several ADs about this early dismissal deal, and they all talk about how this is such an important decision, and you need to take your time, and you need to have an awareness of the market, and you need to have substantial conversations instead of trying to rush it at the end of November. Well, if that's the case, you need to do your research. You need to look at the FCS. You need to look at some of these lower divisions, because there's been a lot of really good coaches that have come out of those ranks. Certainly Lance and Chris are two of them. Jim Tressel, came from the FCS to Ohio State and had a great run there. So you should be paying attention to who's doing well at those schools. Jay Hill's a good example at Weber State. I thought he'd have a shot by now in the FBS, and maybe he'll get one relatively soon. But there's definitely a group of coaches that if you take the time and you really delve into who they are and what they've done, they are certainly worth considering, and in many cases hiring.
Well, do you think that the reason they maybe don't is just they haven't done big time recruiting, so places are worried about that? Because systems, can adapt and adjust, but going out and having those recruiting contacts is maybe a little bit of a different thing. Yeah,
it's certainly a factor, but they can also hire assistants that have those ties. And I do think the player development team, you're talking about Kansas here. Like, Kansas isn't going to win through recruiting. They're going to win through player development. I mean, there's a great piece last week in the LA Times about their quarterback and how nobody wanted him, basically, until Kansas got on him. So it's about identifying talent and developing that talent, and then having schemes that can really maximize the skills. A lot of these schools that have fired coaches, there's a reason that they fired coaches, because they're challenging jobs. Colorado's gone through a lot of coaches lately. Georgia Tech is a challenging job. And so, there obviously are a number of candidates already in the FBS. I mean, another one, Jamie Chadwell. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina, certainly having success in the FBS, but he came up through the Division twos, and he was in the FCS. He's never stepped foot on a Power 5 campus as an employee. So he's somebody who I think will get one of these opportunities very soon. He's 27-3, guys, since the start of the 2020 season. So I just think I think your point is understood and well taken, but I think there's too many pros for those guys in those lower divisions to outweigh maybe a lack of high level recruiting experience.
Adam, with now how things are with realignment, it doesn't mean it's down. It's just simmering, because who knows what might happen. You always see something flare up. Is it nice, even though there could be anything at any moment, is it nice that we're mainly now talking about the football season, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is. I just laugh because I would rather realignment happen now.
Yes,
because when it did happen, I was on the third hole of golf course in California trying to have a vacation, and I get texts about UCLA and USC leaving. And I know, like, okay, this day and this week is ruined. So yeah, do it now. Like, do it while we're all working, instead of in the worst possible time in the summer. So no, I mean, I'm joking, but it certainly is nice to talk about games. And even with NIL, I think there was this fear that oh my God, NIL is going to be everything. It's all we talk about in college sports. It's not. It's part of the game. So is coaching. So is quarterback play. So are schemes on both sides of the ball. So are the games. And obviously, being at Baylor last week was a great experience. I hadn't been on to a game there in a number of years, and like, that's what it's all about. And so, yes, there will be more realignment. We're going to discuss it, but I think the games and the reasons that we all really enjoy the sport are always going to be front and center as well.
Adam, thank you, sir, for your time. Appreciate it. Adam Rittenberg, senior writer, ESPN, covers college football, with us on 365 Sports. We will hear from